It was 11:43 p.m., November 3rd, 2023, in our quiet suburban home in Hartford, Connecticut. The house was as silent as a chapel, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen downstairs. I lay in bed, hugging Henry's pillow as I always did when he was away on one of his business trips. The familiar scent of his cologne was fading, and with it, a sense of comfort I desperately clung to. The day had been uneventful: laundry, errands, a phone call from Henry that lasted all of 5 minutes, and a quick dinner for one. It wasn't unusual. These nights alone had become routine. Still, something about this evening felt different, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stared at the ceiling, the moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting faint shadows that seemed to dance in slow motion. Just as I began to drift into a restless sleep, the soft creak of the bedroom door jolted me upright. My heart skipped a beat, a surge of adrenaline making my skin prickle. The doorway was illuminated faintly by the light from the hallway, and in the frame stood Alex, my 19-year-old son. He hesitated, one hand gripping the edge of the doorframe as if it was the only thing keeping him upright. He was tall and broad-shouldered, but in that moment, he looked almost frail, unsure of himself in a way that was unlike him. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Are you awake?" I sat up, switching on the lamp beside the bed. The warm glow illuminated his face, and I saw something in his expression that made my chest tighten. Hesitation, guilt, and fear all tangled together. "Alex? What's wrong?" I asked, patting the edge of the bed. "Come here." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The air seemed to shift, colder somehow. My stomach churned, though I didn't know why. Alex sat down beside me, his head bowed, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice trembling. "What is it?" I asked, leaning closer. He looked up, his brown eyes meeting mine, filled with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "It's about Dad." My breath caught. "What about him? Is he okay?" Alex hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know how to say this, but Dad hasn't been honest with you." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice sharp with confusion. "I've been keeping this to myself for weeks," Alex continued, his words rushing out now. "But I can't anymore. I saw him, Mom. I saw him with someone else." The room seemed to tilt, and I gripped the edge of the mattress to steady myself. "What are you saying, Alex? That your father is cheating?" Alex nodded, his jaw tightening. "I saw him downtown, at that little cafe near River Street. He was with her. They were holding hands, laughing, and then they kissed." "No," I said, shaking my head. "That's impossible. Your father wouldn't do that. He loves this family." Alex's face hardened. "I know what I saw, Mom, and it wasn't just a one-time thing. I've seen them together more than once." My chest ached, a sharp, stabbing pain that made it hard to breathe. But before I could fully process his words, Alex's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "There's more." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "More? The woman he's seeing?" Alex hesitated, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. "It's Lisa." The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Lisa, our next-door neighbor, my friend. The woman I had confided in, shared countless cups of coffee with on lazy mornings, and trusted implicitly. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That can't be true. Lisa would never." "She would, Mom," Alex said firmly. "And she has. I followed him one night, just to be sure. I saw him go into her house. He didn't leave until after midnight." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My mind raced with memories of Henry and Lisa chatting at barbecues, laughing together during holiday gatherings, their easy camaraderie that I had never questioned. How had I missed the signs? I opened my mouth to speak, but Alex interrupted, his voice breaking. "That's not even the worst part." I froze, my blood running cold. What else could there possibly be? Alex hesitated, his hands gripping his knees tightly. "Lisa isn't just seeing Dad. She's been using me, too. She's been texting me, inviting me over when you're not home. She says things, Mom. Things that make me feel like—" He trailed off, his face crumpling. The room spun. I felt like I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My son, my husband, my neighbor. How had everything unraveled so completely without me noticing? Before I could respond, Alex stood abruptly. "I'm sorry, Mom. I shouldn't have dumped this on you. I didn't know what else to do." He turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind him, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of his revelations. I sat there in the silence, staring at the shadows on the wall, my mind spinning with questions. Was Alex telling the truth? Could Henry really have betrayed me? And Lisa? How could someone I trusted so deeply be capable of such deceit? This Friday night had started like so many others, quiet, lonely, and uneventful. But now, everything had changed, and I had no idea how to face what was coming next. The night passed in a haze of restless half-sleep, my thoughts a chaotic whirlpool of questions and doubts. By the time the morning sun peeked through the curtains, I hadn't found a single answer. Alex's words played on an endless loop in my mind. Lisa, my neighbor, my confidant, my friend, and Henry, my husband of 20 years, the man I thought I knew better than anyone. How could any of it be true? By 7:30 a.m., the house was awake. Alex's door was closed, his silence as heavy as the tension hanging in the air. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the warm mug doing little to soothe the cold dread settling in my chest. I needed to know the truth, but the idea of confronting Henry over the phone felt futile. He was always guarded during his trips, his conversations brief and measured. And Lisa? How could I even face her without unraveling completely? The doorbell rang, jolting me from my spiraling thoughts. I set my mug down, my hands trembling slightly as I opened the door. There she was, Lisa, standing on the porch in her usual cheerful demeanor, holding a plate of freshly baked muffins. "Morning, neighbor," she chirped, her smile radiant as ever. A veil of normalcy. I stared at her, my throat tightening. She looked exactly the same as she always did, effortlessly put together in a casual sundress, her blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail. I wondered if she could see the storm brewing behind my eyes. "I thought I'd bring these over," she continued, holding out the plate. "I baked too many again, and who better to share with than my favorite neighbor?" I forced a smile, the muscles in my face protesting. "That's so sweet, Lisa. Thanks." "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "You look a little off. Late night?" Her words felt like a slap, the double meaning cutting deep. I hesitated, my grip tightening on the plate of muffins. "Yeah," I said finally, my voice hollow. "Something like that." Lisa's eyes lingered on me, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something. Concern? Guilt? It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual warmth. "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me," she said with a wink. "Tell Alex I said hi." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, but I nodded numbly as she turned and walked back across the lawn. The plate in my hands suddenly felt heavy, like it carried the weight of the truth I wasn't ready to face. Alex's confession by mid-morning, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I knocked on Alex's door, waiting for the muffled, "Come in," before stepping inside. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, scrolling through his phone. "Hey," I said softly, closing the door behind me. He glanced up, his expression guarded. "Hey." I sat down beside him, the bed creaking under our weight. "We need to talk about what you told me last night." Alex set his phone aside, his shoulders stiffening. "I know it's a lot to take in," he said, "and I'm sorry if I messed things up, but I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." "You didn't mess anything up," I assured him. "But Alex, are you absolutely sure about what you saw? About Lisa?" His jaw tightened, and he nodded. "I wouldn't have told you if I wasn't sure, Mom. I know what I saw." I took a deep breath, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "And the messages? You said she's been texting you. Do you still have them?" Alex hesitated, then grabbed his phone. He scrolled for a moment before handing it to me. My heart sank as I read the texts. They started off innocently enough. Questions about his classes, casual comments about family gatherings. But then they took a turn. "You looked so handsome at the barbecue last weekend. You should stop by sometime when your mom's out. I'd love the company. You're so mature for your age, Alex. I bet all the girls your age don't even know what to do with a man like you." I felt sick. "Why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I didn't know how," Alex admitted. "I thought maybe I was overthinking it at first. But then, after I saw her with Dad, I knew it wasn't just me. She's playing both of us, Mom." The dilemma, the text confirmed it. Lisa was crossing boundaries with my son while having an affair with my husband. The betrayal was so layered, so insidious, that I didn't know where to begin. "What do we do now?" Alex asked, his voice trembling. I stared at the phone in my hands, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to confront Lisa immediately, to demand answers and tear down her carefully constructed facade. But another part of me, the part still reeling from the shock, knew I wasn't ready for that. "I need to talk to your father," I said finally. Alex's expression darkened. "And what if he denies it? What if he tries to turn it around on us?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I have to hear what he has to say." The call that evening, after Alex had gone to his room, I finally worked up the nerve to call Henry. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up, his voice as steady and familiar as always. "Hey, honey," he said. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, my grip tightening on the phone. "We need to talk," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "All right," Henry said cautiously. "What's going on?" "It's about Lisa," I said, my heart pounding. There was a pause on the other end of the line, just long enough to send my anxiety spiraling. "What about her?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I know, Henry," I said, forcing the words out. "I know about you and her. Alex saw you. He followed you. And I've seen the texts she's been sending him." The silence that followed was deafening. "Linda," he began, his voice low and measured, "it's not what you think." "Don't," I snapped, cutting him off. "Don't insult me by trying to lie your way out of this." "I'm not lying," he insisted. "Just give me a chance to explain." "Then explain," I demanded, my voice trembling. There was another pause, and then he said something that made my blood run cold. "She's not who you think she is, Linda, and this is bigger than you or me." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart racing. "I can't tell you over the phone," he said, "but whatever Alex told you, it's only part of the story." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my mind spinning. What did he mean, bigger than you or me? What was he hiding? And why did I feel like this was only the beginning? The sharp click of the call disconnecting left me frozen, the phone still pressed against my ear. Henry's words, cryptic and unsettling, echoed in my mind. "She's not who you think she is, and this is bigger than you or me." What could he possibly mean? What bigger thing could justify the betrayal I now had to confront? Not just his infidelity, but Lisa's unsettling behavior toward Alex. I set the phone down, my hand trembling, and stared out the window into the darkness of the quiet suburban street. The house across from ours, Lisa's house, was dim, its curtains drawn tight. But even the silence felt loud, as though it were taunting me with secrets I couldn't yet piece together. By morning, I knew one thing. I couldn't wait for Henry to return home in 2 days. This needed to be resolved now. Confronting Lisa, it was Saturday, November 4th, 10:13 a.m. Alex had gone out to meet a friend, and the house was eerily quiet. I hadn't planned on confronting Lisa yet, but as I washed the breakfast dishes, I saw her step outside to water her plants. Something inside me snapped. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked outside, my footsteps purposeful. She looked up as I approached, her smile bright and disarming. "Hey, Linda, everything okay?" Her voice grated on me, too cheerful, too casual for someone who had sent messages to my son like the ones I had seen. "We need to talk," I said, my tone leaving no room for pleasantries. Her smile faltered. "Sure, what's up?" "Inside," I said curtly, gesturing toward her door. "This isn't a conversation for the driveway." Lisa hesitated, her eyes scanning my face, but after a moment, she nodded and opened the door. I followed her into her immaculately decorated living room. She set her watering can on the floor and crossed her arms. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with unease. "You know exactly what this is about," I said, taking a step closer. "I know about you and Henry." Her eyes widened, but she didn't respond immediately. I pressed on. "Don't deny it," I said, my voice rising. "Alex saw you. I know about the nights he spent here, about the way you've been texting my son." The color drained from Lisa's face, but still, she said nothing. "You disgust me," I spat, my hands shaking. "You betrayed me, betrayed our family. How long did you think you could keep this up?" Finally, Lisa spoke, her voice low and measured. "Linda, it's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "That's exactly what Henry said. And you know what? I'm tired of hearing that excuse. So why don't you tell me what you think it is?" The unraveling begins. Lisa sighed, her shoulders slumping. "This isn't about an affair," she said quietly. "At least, not in the way you think." "What's that supposed to mean?" I demanded. She sat down on the edge of her couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Henry came to me months ago," she began. "He needed help. He told me something I didn't know how to handle. Something about Alex." My stomach dropped. "What about Alex?" Lisa hesitated, her eyes darting toward the window as if checking for onlookers. "Henry thinks Alex is in danger." "What?" I blinked, confusion overtaking my anger. "What kind of danger?" "I don't know all the details," Lisa admitted. "But Henry said there's someone who's been watching Alex. Someone dangerous. He asked me to keep an eye on him, to make sure he was safe. That's why he's been here, Linda. That's why I've been texting Alex, to keep him close, to make sure he's okay." Her explanation hit me like a slap. My mind reeled, torn between disbelief and a small, gnawing sense of doubt. Could Henry really have been protecting Alex all this time? And if so, why hadn't he told me? "And the texts?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How do you explain those?" Lisa frowned. "I know how they look, Linda, but I swear, I never meant for them to seem inappropriate. I thought if I stayed friendly, Alex would trust me." My pulse pounded in my ears. Could she be telling the truth? Could Henry? Or was this an elaborate story to cover up something far more sinister? Alex's confession when I returned home, my head spinning with Lisa's revelations. Alex was already back. He was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, but he looked up the moment I walked in. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "We need to talk," I said, pulling out a chair across from him. His brow furrowed. "What now?" I hesitated, my mind still grappling with Lisa's words. "Alex, has anyone strange been around you lately? Anyone you don't recognize?" His expression shifted, his guarded demeanor slipping for a moment. "Why are you asking that?" "Just answer me," I pressed. Alex glanced down at his hands, his voice barely above a whisper. "There was someone." "What do you mean?" I demanded, leaning forward. "I didn't want to worry you," he said quickly, "but a few weeks ago, I noticed this guy hanging around campus. He didn't look like a student, too old, too out of place. I caught him watching me a couple of times, but he always disappeared before I could say anything." A cold chill ran down my spine. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought I was imagining it," Alex admitted. "And then, after everything with Lisa and Dad, I didn't want to add more drama." My heart pounded. Lisa's story suddenly didn't seem so far-fetched. The next call that evening, I called Henry again, this time with a new sense of urgency. He answered on the first ring. "Linda, I'm glad you called," he said immediately. "We need to talk." "Damn right we do," I said. "What's going on, Henry? What's this about Alex being in danger?" There was a pause, and then Henry sighed. I didn't want to tell you until I had more information, he said. But there's a man I've been looking into. Someone who has ties to my work. He's dangerous, Linda. And I think he's targeting Alex to get to me. Why Alex? I demanded. Because he's vulnerable, Henry said simply. And because he's our son. The words hit me like a freight train. Our son? I repeated. Linda, there's more to this than I can explain right now, Henry said quickly. I'll be home tomorrow, and I'll tell you everything. But you need to promise me something. Don't let Alex out of your sight. The line went dead again, leaving me stunned. What was Henry hiding? And why did it feel like the truth was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about our family? Sunday morning dawned cold and gray, the kind of November day that felt oppressive even before the sun rose fully. The weight of Henry's cryptic words, "I'll tell you everything when I get home," hung over the house like a storm cloud. Alex stayed in his room most of the morning, his door closed, his silence heavier than usual. I didn't push him. After the revelations of the past 2 days, I wasn't sure how much more either of us could take. But as the hours ticked by and Henry's arrival drew closer, my anxiety only grew. It was 2:18 p.m. when I heard Henry's car pull into the driveway. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter as he stepped through the door. He looked exhausted, his usual polished demeanor replaced by an unshaven face and dark circles under his eyes. Linda, he said, setting his bag down by the door. We need to talk. No kidding. I shot back, crossing my arms. You've got a lot of explaining to do. Henry held up his hands, his voice calm but firm. I know, and I will. But not here. Where's Alex? He's upstairs, I said. But you're not dragging him into this until you explain to me what the hell is going on. Henry sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, let's sit down. The confession we sat across from each other at the dining table, the tension in the air almost suffocating. Henry leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and for the first time in years, I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes, fear. Lisa's been helping me, he began, his voice low. I know, I said, cutting him off. She told me you asked her to keep an eye on Alex. But she also said you think someone's watching him. Why? What aren't you telling me? Henry took a deep breath. It's because of my work, he said finally. There's a man, Derek Monroe. He's dangerous. And a few months ago, he got caught up in one of the deals I was overseeing. Things went south, and I had to make some tough calls. Tough calls? I asked, my voice sharp. What does that mean? It means I exposed him, Henry admitted, his face grim. I uncovered evidence that he was embezzling from the company and handed it over to the authorities. He lost everything. His job, his reputation, his family. And now he's coming after you? I asked, my heart pounding. Henry nodded. Not just me. He wants to hurt the people I care about. And I think he's targeting Alex to get to me. A chilling confirmation before I could respond. The front door creaked open, and Alex stepped into the room. His expression was guarded, but I could see the tension in his jaw. I heard everything, he said, his voice tight. Henry stood, but Alex held up a hand to stop him. Save it, Dad. If this guy's so dangerous, why didn't you tell me? Why did you drag Lisa into this instead of coming to me? Because I didn't want you to worry, Henry said, and because Lisa was in a position to help without raising suspicion. Alex shook his head, his anger palpable. So what? You just decided I couldn't handle the truth? That I needed babysitting? It wasn't like that, Henry insisted. I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? Alex snapped. Some guy I've never even met? Or the fact that you've been lying to us for years? The real bombshell. Henry hesitated, his gaze shifting between me and Alex. For a moment, he looked like he might crumble under the weight of what he was about to say. There's something else you need to know, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I froze, the air in the room seeming to grow colder. What is it? Henry glanced at Alex, his expression pained. This isn't just about Monroe. It's about why he's targeting Alex specifically. What are you talking about? Alex demanded. Henry looked down at his hands, his voice trembling. Monroe isn't just a random threat. He's your biological father. The words hit like a freight train, and the room spun around me. Alex staggered back, his face pale. "What?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "It was a long time ago," Henry said quickly, "before Linda and I were married. Monroe and I worked together, and he had a relationship with Linda. I felt the ground fall away beneath me." "You knew?" I choked out. Henry nodded, his expression heavy with regret. "I found out after we got married. Monroe never wanted to be a part of Alex's life, so I stepped in. I raised him as my own because I love him. But when Monroe figured out that Alex existed, he started looking for ways to use him. Against me, against all of us." The fallout, the silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Alex's uneven breathing. "You lied to me," Alex said finally, his voice shaking with rage. "Both of you. My entire life has been a lie." "Alex, please," I said, standing to reach for him, but he backed away, his hands clenched into fists. "Don't," he said sharply. "I don't even know who I am anymore." He turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. The chase panic surged through me as I grabbed my coat and ran after him. Henry followed, calling Alex's name, but he was already halfway down the street. "Alex, stop!" I shouted, my voice breaking. He spun around, his face a mask of anguish. "Stop what? Pretending this family isn't a joke? Pretending everything I've ever believed wasn't a lie? We didn't mean to hurt you," I said desperately. "We thought we were doing the right thing." Alex let out a bitter laugh. "The right thing? How is any of this right? You lied to me about who I am, and now I'm supposed to just move on?" Before I could respond, a car screeched to a halt at the end of the street. A black sedan. The windows were tinted, but I could feel the weight of its presence like a shadow falling over us. Henry grabbed my arm, his voice urgent. "Get back to the house. Now." "What is it?" I asked, fear clawing at my chest. "It's him," Henry said grimly. "Monroe." The cliffhanger, the car door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and imposing, his eyes cold as they locked onto Alex. "Time to come with me, kid," Monroe said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "Over my dead body," Henry growled, stepping in front of Alex. Monroe smiled. "If that's how you want to play it." The air crackled with tension, and I felt the ground beneath us shifting, the fragile stability of our family shattering entirely. This wasn't just about secrets anymore. This was about survival. The tension in the air was suffocating as Derek Monroe stood by his car, a shadowy figure against the cold November sky. His calm, almost amused demeanor contrasted sharply with the fear pounding in my chest. Alex stood frozen behind Henry, his fists clenched, while Henry took a deliberate step forward, placing himself squarely between Monroe and our son. "I told you to stay away from my family," Henry said, his voice low and deadly. Monroe smirked, leaning casually against the car door. "Your family? That's funny, considering he's my son." A dangerous standoff. Alex's breath hitched audibly. "You're lying," he said, his voice shaky but defiant. Monroe chuckled darkly. "Am I? Ask your mom. Ask Henry. They've been lying to you your whole life, kid. But not me. I've got nothing to hide." "Enough," I shouted, stepping forward, my voice trembling with both fear and fury. "What do you want, Derek?" Monroe turned his gaze on me, his eyes sharp and calculating. "What I want, Linda, is to remind Henry what happens when you cross me. You think you can ruin my life, take my son, and I'll just walk away? You don't care about Alex," Henry spat. "You're using him to settle a score. That's all this is." Monroe shrugged, his smirk never faltering. "Maybe, but the truth has a funny way of hurting, doesn't it?" Alex's breaking point. Alex stepped out from behind Henry, his face pale but determined. "Stop talking about me like I'm not here," he said, his voice trembling. "You think you can just show up and claim me? After 19 years of nothing?" Monroe's smirk faltered for a split second, but he quickly recovered. "It's not that simple, Alex." "Then make it simple," Alex shot back, his anger boiling over. "Tell me why you're really here." Monroe's expression hardened. "I want what's mine, and that includes you." "Over my dead body," Henry said, stepping closer. Monroe's eyes narrowed. "That can be arranged." The fight the moment the words left Monroe's mouth, Henry lunged. The two men collided with a force that sent them both crashing into the side of the car. Monroe recovered quickly, throwing a punch that caught Henry in the jaw, but Henry didn't back down. He grabbed Monroe by the collar, slamming him against the car. "Get inside now," Henry shouted over his shoulder at Alex and me. But Alex didn't move. He stood rooted to the spot, his face a mix of shock and fury. "Alex," I yelled, grabbing his arm. "We have to go." "I'm not leaving him," Alex said, his voice breaking. Monroe managed to push Henry off, grabbing something from his pocket, a knife. The blade gleamed in the fading sunlight, and my stomach dropped. "Henry!" I screamed. But before Monroe could make a move, Alex stepped forward, his voice ringing out. "Stop." A stunning decision, everyone froze. Monroe turned to Alex, his knife still in hand, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing, kid?" Monroe asked, his voice softer now. "I'm ending this," Alex said, his jaw clenched. "You want me? Fine. I'll go with you. But only if you leave them alone." "Alex, no." I cried, grabbing his arm. Henry staggered to his feet, wiping blood from his lip. "Don't you dare, Alex. Don't let him manipulate you." Monroe tilted his head, his smirk returning. "See? The boy's smarter than you think, Henry. He knows where he belongs." "No, I don't," Alex snapped. "But I know I'm not letting you hurt my family anymore." Monroe's expression flickered with something. Regret, perhaps, or pride. He lowered the knife slightly, his shoulders relaxing. "All right," he said. "Let's go." "No," Henry growled, stepping between them. "You're not taking him anywhere." The police arrived before Monroe could respond. The wail of sirens cut through the tension. A police cruiser screeched to a halt at the end of the street, and two officers stepped out, their hands hovering near their holsters. "Step away from the boy," one of them shouted. Monroe's smirk faded entirely as he dropped the knife, raising his hands. "Easy, officers. Just a misunderstanding." Henry grabbed Alex and pulled him behind him, shielding him as the officers approached. "I told you I'd stop you," Henry muttered under his breath, glaring at Monroe. Monroe laughed bitterly. "This isn't over, Henry. Not by a long shot." The aftermath, the officers arrested Monroe, his threats echoing in my ears long after they took him away. I sat on the couch that night, holding Alex's hand tightly as Henry paced the living room. "We need to tell him everything," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Henry stopped, his shoulders slumping. "I know." Alex looked between us, his face pale but steady. "No more lies," he said. "No more secrets." So we told him everything. About my brief relationship with Monroe before Henry and I got together. About the years of silence, the decision to raise Alex as Henry's son. About the threats Monroe had made after losing everything. By the time we finished, Alex sat in stunned silence, his hand still in mine. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said finally, his voice breaking, "but I'll try." A fragile peace. The days that followed were tense but quieter. Monroe remained in custody, facing charges that would likely keep him away for years. Henry and I began to rebuild the trust we had broken, brick by brick. Alex stayed guarded, his anger slow to fade, but he didn't leave. And for now, that was enough. The final twist: a week later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. I opened it carefully, my hands shaking. "Linda, you think this is over. It's not. There's more to this story than you know. And one day, Alex will want the truth I didn't get to tell him." Derek, my stomach churned as I read the words, dread settling deep in my bones. This chapter might have ended, but Derek Monroe wasn't finished. And somewhere deep down, I knew he was right.